Hello and welcome to this edition of the Flabota podcast, hosted by the Fort Lauderdale chapter of Abota. I am Flabota President Jeff Adelman, and this program is brought to you by our sponsor, Trilogy Trial Consultants, for all your trial presentation needs. TrilogyTrial.com, 813-995-8880. Today is a very special edition of the podcast. We really have an opportunity to speak with somebody who has been a superstar in Broward County for over 30 years, done so much in the legal community, an accomplished trial lawyer, a state court judge, and now a federal court judge, Judge Raj Singhal. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Jeff, thanks so much for having me, and congratulations on being installed as president of Flabota. That's exciting news.
Well, thank you very much. We had this in the works before I was appointed, and I was very excited about this one because I know with your background, you've done so much in your career, starting with being I think you did some civil practice and then went right into criminal. You were a prosecutor and you were a criminal defense attorney for the majority of your career. Can you tell us a little bit about your background as a lawyer?
Sure. So when I graduated law school, I had accepted a job at Fleming O'Brien and Fleming, which was at that point a fairly large Fort Lauderdale law firm. I think probably about 35 lawyers. So certainly not large by big law standards, but for Fort Lauderdale, a good size. And I had been there my 2L summer as a law clerk, and then went there. And I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the work, but it was much more of an office practice than what I was looking for, particularly at that age and with that level of energy, having just come out of law school. And so I kind of got lucky in the sense that I had a case that I was working on, and the plaintiff's lawyer was Kelly Hancock. And Kelly had just left the Broward State Attorney's Office. He was a renowned homicide prosecutor there. He had signed a contract. At that time, it was Krupnick and Campbell, and just to kind of see if he would like the PI practice. And so he and I got to talking, and he said, maybe you should go to the state attorney's office and get some trial experience. And so he walked me over there, and it's probably the best way to get hired when someone like Kelly Hancock walks you into his former employer and says, hey, take a look at this guy. So I was hired by Mr. Satz at the state attorney's office and stayed there about 3.5 years. But I decided at that point in time that it was a good time, if I wanted to take a chance on opening my own office. And criminal defense practices are smaller practices. And so in 1993, I did that. And stuck with that for 18 years until 2011, when I was appointed to the state court bench by then Governor Scott.
Wow, and I did a little homework on you, and during your 18-year career, I found an article that said you had 204 jury trials.
Well,
33.
The 204 does include the cases that I handled as a prosecutor in the 3.5 years too, and I have to let you know, back then, there were times where we would do, at least in the county court division, a couple trials in a week. So it was crazy. But I think the numbers were 72 as a prosecutor and 132 as a criminal defense lawyer. So, having that, it's much different than the work that you do in terms of some of these complicated, complex civil cases with regard to jury selection and how all that works. But just being able to be in the well and being involved in selecting 204 juries, practice helps you with anything. And you kind of get to know people, and and get more skilled at making those relatively split-second decisions about, is this juror good for me or not? And so it really helped me in many things. It helped me in court, but it also helped me in just life in general.
Well, the numbers 72 and 132 would be impressive on their own, but 204, I mean, that's about as many as you can get in that period of time. Most of your experience as a practicing attorney was in criminal defense and prosecuting crimes. And whether it be in the state court or federal court, you deal with a lot of civil matters. How did you make that adjustment?
So I had a little bit of experience as I was doing the criminal cases with civil cases. For example, if I was handling a particularly bad DUI case, like a DUI manslaughter, there was often an insurance component involved with that. And so the civil lawyer would make contact with me, and we would talk about their case and their strategies. And similarly, in the federal courts, 1983 actions, which involve, civil rights violations, that kind of thing, that was pretty limited. In all candor, as a judge, I started out in criminal, and I stayed in criminal from 2011 to 2017 in the state court system. And then Chief Judge Tudor moved me in 2017 from criminal to civil. And I was a little bit resistant to that change for the wrong reasons. The main reason was criminal was pretty easy for me. And I hate to say it like this, but there's really just a handful of issues that come up repetitively in the criminal cases. And, you know them, you can identify them, you can kind of do things more easily there. And having been transferred, though, to civil, it allowed me to be exposed to a whole different group and crew of lawyers. Frankly, it would have been unlikely that I ever met you if I wouldn't have been transferred over. Now, the year I got transferred over, in that same year, Judge Levinson, Judge Bidwell, Judge Hames, Judge Robinson, and all five of us were transferred criminal to civil. I was the fifth of five. And so that was another good thing, because it wasn't like I didn't have colleagues that hadn't gone through that transfer that I couldn't talk to. I had a lot of help in terms of just what it's like. But I would tell you, I loved being in civil. I thought the issues were very interesting, many more issues. And so I think it really helped me when then at the end of 2019, I got here in federal court to have had that experience in both criminal and civil.
Well, from the comments that I read about, when you were appointed to the federal court, on both sides of the aisle, obviously read through them, and very universally respected, very down the middle, even tempered. That's what your reputation is from everything I've experienced with you and from other people. How do you keep so measured with dealing with all the different issues that you have, that you deal with?
Part of it is I'm a lot older now, and age helps with all of those things. You have experience with a variety of different issues. Whether it's at home raising kids or in court having seen a variety of things. You get to realize more and more, although a lot of people, I will tell you, at a younger age have this figured out. But you realize that things, you don't own each case. You are not as important to the case as a judge as the lawyers and the litigant, in the sense that if you as the judge moved on to a different division or to a different position, the case would still be there. So you can't take things personally like that. But I do think that there are a lot of ways that lawyers in general need to be careful in terms of the stress that comes with work. It's important to have a good work-life balance. It's important to stay physically fit. I think you might know I'm a long distance runner, and so that brings me great peace in terms of physical and mental health. So, I mean, every morning I'm out usually doing about 7 or 8 miles, and so it really then sets the day up nicely for me.
That's pretty impressive. You do that almost every day?
I do. I have a goal that a number of people actually don't know about, but by the end of May 2025, I should hit in my lifetime 100,000 miles. And so I have to keep that pace that I mentioned to you of 7 miles a day to reach that goal, or I'll fall short. Look, I might fall short and then I'll just have to reach it later, but it's always good to set goals like that, because then it gives you something to reach for.
Well, it's again, a peaceful thing to do with your thoughts. And that's wonderful that you've kept that up. Let me ask you this. You've gone from state court and you were appointed by former President Trump to the federal bench in 2019. I think it's important to note, like I said before, the Senate affirmed that your choice as a federal judge 76-17, which I think speaks to your reputation. But being on the federal bench now, as opposed to state, what have you noticed are the biggest transitions that you've had to make?
I left the state court system in a position where I knew a lot. I had a lot of collective knowledge because of my years, particularly in criminal, but I was getting there in civil as well. And I had done a good amount of teaching at in the judicial conferences, and then I came to federal, and I didn't know anything. I mean, they're basic things that but you don't know important things, just how things work in the federal system, the protocols, the different types of cases, the variety of cases. And so one of the things that you always have to remember is, like any job, but in this job in particular, you're always learning. It's not something where you get to a point where it's like, okay, this is easy, I know this. There are always nuances and always things to learn. I think that's a great thing, though. That keeps you mentally engaged. It keeps you fresh and young and things like that. I've been really impressed with the quality of the help here in federal court, in the sense that any colleagues that you reach to for question or advice, rarely is it a novel issue. They've been through it before, and so that's very helpful. My courtroom deputy clerk and my law clerks, they're just excellent. They have a lot of institutional knowledge. And then the lawyers are really, really great in terms of how they present the issues. Federal court's a lot different than state court in the sense that many of the matters that we decide are decided on the papers without a hearing, whereas in state court, in a lot of situations, hearings are mandated. And but if something's decided on the papers and routinely decided on the papers, then I think the lawyers know, boy, I got to get this in and get my arguments in there. And so that in and of itself changes the quality of what's coming in to you. It's not a or a tennis type of presentation. But really, there's a lot to learn. I'm always learning. I'm certainly much more comfortable now than when I started, but I do like that there's so much variety.
And is it, different having more staff as a federal judge as opposed to being a state court judge, having the ability to really get into certain issues with the help of others that you may not have had in state court?
Without a doubt. You know, a couple things. State court, for example, a normal criminal division is going to be about 800 to 1,000 cases. A normal civil division in circuit court, it is somewhere between it's somewhere around 2,500 cases. So both of those numbers, when you come to federal court, it's about a tenth, about 100 criminal cases, about 250 civil cases. And so right away by volume, you have far fewer cases here, so you can get into them more. And then, of course, just as you mentioned, the help, the quality of the law clerks that you have here. You know, in our state court system, we don't have law clerks. We do have a pool staff attorney system and some great lawyers there, but you know, it's not like you have a attorney that is helping you on each and every case. Now, on the other hand, in state court, you can often make findings in court on the record. You have those, I think you've probably gotten them before, like any lawyer, those orders in triplicate where the judge writes them out and signs it and tears them apart. And, you know, we don't have that here. So, but that's just a function of the volume. But it's really remarkable here to be able to get into some of these issues. Of course, you're often producing orders that are 10, 20, 30 pages long. 30 pages is awfully long for me. I mean, if I am in that 10 to 15 page range, that's a long order for me. But, you know, some of my colleagues, they can just write so beautifully. I don't know how they kind of get it to flow, and I tend to be a little bit more brief, but hopefully the orders still explain everything the way that they should.
Absolutely. You know, recently it's just we planned this weeks in advance, and then Monday this week, there was your decision was talked about in the national news. There was a motion to dismiss granted in the case that former President Donald Trump brought against CNN. Given that most of your cases you are not going to get into the newspaper for or anything like that, but this one has national implications. What's it like working on a case like that, knowing there's a possibility that your name, whether you like it or not, is going to be on the front page of national publications?
Well, I think that that's another beauty of the federal court system, is that it's really lends itself to an independent judiciary. You don't have to worry about running for election like you do in the state court system. You can get into the case and look at the law and the facts and apply the law as written, and then write your opinion. From a personal perspective, we do everything here to try to stay out of the media, but there are certain cases, as you know, that there's nothing you can do. But as an example, that particular order that you referenced, we put it out Friday evening at 10:30 p.m. Our thought was, you know, maybe it'll kind of slide under the radar a little bit. Other things will happen, and then people will say, hey, a week ago something happened, and there wouldn't be as much written. But you know, you can see, I mean, people are on top of things like that. Now, my background, particularly in criminal defense, meant that I handled some pretty well-known cases, and so I've had my fair share of press coverage, not so much national or worldwide or that kind of thing, but really, you know, what you try to do is just analyze the case, apply the law, and know that there's nothing you can ever do that'll make everybody happy. And as my friend Judge Jeff Levinson says, you know, you're not out there looking for friends. You're just trying to do your job. And so that's just the best way you can kind of go forward. And then with anything in life, you know, typically a couple of weeks down the road and everyone's on to something else. So you just have to kind of make it over that initial hump and you're good.
Definitely in today's news cycle, for sure. Staying with that a little bit, in state court, there is, with regarding cameras. In state court, it's more permissible. In federal court, that's very extenuating circumstances. I know that this is going to come up quite frequently in the news. Is there anything that the federal court can do to possibly allow some of these cases that are going to be in the news, and everyone knows what I'm talking about with Donald Trump, broadcasting those? And why is there a difference between state court and federal court with that? That's like 3 questions, so do the best you can.
No, it's a very good question, very important question. I know that people are interested in it as well. And frankly, in the state court system, I don't know that cameras and the media were always allowed, but I think it's probably been close to 40 or 50 years that's been allowed. And sometimes too, even in the state court system, it has to be pared down. I know that we had a number of cases in Broward where the chief judge would issue an order saying, look, 1 camera and everyone can share the feed, because you want to, particularly on the criminal side, make sure that the parties, the defendant in particular, gets a fair trial, that the presumption of innocence does attach. On the other hand, from your perspective, people have a right to be informed. Part of the issue with the coverage, I think, is that if there is coverage, and if something's live streamed, for example, people can watch and make their own decisions as to what the truth is, as opposed to reading it secondhand in whatever periodical or media source that they choose. Federal court has a much higher level of security than state court, and so that's another reason why cameras are typically not allowed. Just the type of cases, the type of security that we have. So I imagine at some point there are certain things that could be relaxed, but really what we do is, we rely on this system that has worked well for centuries to continue to work well, and to ensure that those people that are having their cases heard are treated fairly, and that the jurors are concentrating on the case, not on something involving the media.
Understood. Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned Judge Jeffrey Levinson. I know you guys are good friends.
Sure.
Can you talk about the relationships you've had over the years with your fellow members of the judiciary and what that means to you?
Oh, sure. I was very fortunate in the sense that some people, I think, obviously they become judges at a younger age than others, and it's right for some people, but not everybody. There's kind of a timing for it, and I was fortunate that I had practiced for 22 years before I became a state court judge. And in that 22 years, I had actually argued trials. You referenced the number of trials I had, but trials or very important litigated motions in front of, I think, 75 different judges. And to me, that was really an important thing, because I got to observe different styles, things that I might want to emulate, things that I might not want to emulate, and really pick up on a lot of things. And then I began applying to be a judge in 2005, and ironically, the first time I put in, which is summer of 2005, it was for 2 seats, and the 2 judges that got appointed for those 2 seats were Judge Marty Bidwell and Judge Jeff Levinson. And so, you develop a different relationship as you go through this with people, and some people, as they go through it, develop an antagonistic relationship with others that may have gotten a job that they wanted. And it's just never been the way that I am. I mean, I think part of being a good lawyer is building relationships and expanding your network. I always have focused on attorney and counselor at law, and remembering that there's that counselor at law part too. You know, everything doesn't have to be adversarial. There are times where you're called on to give advice. And so I've known Judge Levinson now, hard to believe, for 18 years, 20 years. I think maybe he got on the county court bench in 2003. Judge Bidwell, longer than that. He, I think, was one of my interns at the state attorney's office, probably in 92 or 91. You don't develop these relationships because you think, hey, 32 years from now, this person could help me in something. But you develop these relationships, and look, Jeff, sure enough, there are times where you can help each other, and you trust each other because you've known each other for that long period of time. And so I just had wonderful relationships in the state court system, many of which came through the teaching, the Florida Judicial College, Advanced Judicial Studies. And then here in federal court, I've made some great friends, in particular, Judge Roy Altman, Judge Bob Scola. I mean, these are people that I knew, but really didn't know well. And just so many of the people that I've met here, it's part of what makes the job even better.
It makes it a lot more enjoyable.
Yes.
To have those relationships too.
Definitely.
No doubt about
definitely. And, you know, and I should add, Jeff, I mean, like we had alluded to it before, but I only know you because I got transferred to civil. And then, having been transferred to civil, Judge Levinson introduced us at a BOTA meeting. I don't know, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, maybe, you know, but then over time.
I remember that.
Yeah. So
the professionalism seminar.
Right. And so what happens is, you know, the relationships you make, you foster those, and then they lead to other relationships, and it's like a big oak tree, you know, all the branches keep spreading out and growing wider, and before you know it, you have this beautiful network.
Absolutely. Makes it a lot more richer experience for all of us. Well, let me ask you this, Judge Singal, because you've been very generous with your time. And what can we do as lawyers to make your job a little bit easier? What type of things are, well, selfishly better for us, but it helps you better process the case and better understand things? What type of advice can you give us that would help you?
Sure. That's another great question. I don't know that that I can easily answer that. You know, my view has always been, as a judge, I get to read the filings, read the law, and make a decision. But as a judge, in no way am I sitting in a position where I'm saying, hey, I know your case better than you do. And so I think it's always important for me to realize that you and your opposition know the case better than I do. And so what you really want to do, both sides, is you want to educate the judge as best as you can about the important issues. I tend to like things that are more concise rather than long. I assume everyone's like that, but I don't know. I mean, it's always nicer to read a couple pages rather than many pages, but sometimes you can't do it. But I do think that one of the big things we all struggle with, and here I'm preaching to the choir because I think that most of the people that are going to be listening to your podcast already know all of this. But, you know, we didn't have that paragraph in the oath of admission to the Florida bar that deals with professionalism and civility until 2011. So that means all of those years before 2011, it was kind of a given. And for some reason, that paragraph had to be added in. And I think it had to be added in because there were just a lot of circumstances where there was a lack of professionalism and a lack of civility. And frankly, I think that the lawyers, understanding it's an adversarial process, can still get along in terms of how they make their presentations. That's another thing that I've seen more in federal court than in state court. It does seem to be a much more professional presentation from both sides. But to cut to the chase, I would say definitely argue your best issues. Use it as an opportunity to educate the judge about the important facts to you. The judge ought to be pretty good on the law, but really, if there are specific facts that change your case from other cases, and do it as briefly as possible and as professionally as possible. I would think all the judges would kind of be in agreement with that type of thing.
Well, I'd like to kind of end it with this, Judge Singal. I mean, obviously, ABOTA is committed to the preservation of the Seventh Amendment right to civil jury trial. And I was reading through different articles about you, and I saw that you're the first Asian Pacific American and Indian American to serve as an Article III federal judge on the 11th Circuit. I know your parents were immigrants, and you're very close with them. And I know you feel very strongly about jury service. And I know there's a story that you like to tell jury panels about your mother. Could you share that with us?
Sure. And Jeff, I know you didn't mean it this way, but the 11th Circuit, really the jurisdiction of the 11th Circuit, in the sense that I think that there had been other judges that sat on the 11th Circuit by invitation, but in terms of the jurisdiction, so Florida, Alabama, Georgia, there haven't been any other Article III judges that had been nominated and confirmed, which is kind of interesting, I mean, it's one of the reasons that I kept putting in for state court judge, because they're really, I thought that was a good secondary reason. I felt I was qualified, and then secondarily, I could bring some diversity there. Well, basically, back in the 80s, my mom was called for jury duty, and we lived in Houston, Texas, but Houston's a really sprawling city, so we lived about 25 miles from the courthouse. I guess that having been said, that's not even uncommon in Broward County, so you could have people 25 miles away from you, right? So she got subpoenaed for jury duty, and as she had come to America in 1959 and become a naturalized citizen in 1976, which was pretty cool because it was the bicentennial, and so it was a little bit even more special than the ceremonies that we do. And at the time that she got this subpoena or summons for jury service, she was pretty ill. I mean, she had a lot of illnesses, and so I had asked her to kind of get an excuse and not go for jury service. And I'm giving you a very abbreviated version of the story, but in essence, she told me that, look, I've been called for jury duty, and our country doesn't ask very much of us at all. We've benefited from the freedoms that we have here. My parents, just as a corollary, grew up in India when India was under British rule, and they saw India gain her freedom, but still saw all of the issues in corruption, and then came to America. And so she said just how important it was for her to go and serve, and if selected, to serve on the jury. And sure enough, she got selected. It was a 3-week trial, and she's going back and forth. And it was a great story for me, because this was even before I did my law school applications. I mean, I wasn't at that time certain that I would go to law school. I had wanted to, but I wasn't certain. But I think that really solidified my resolve to go to law school and become a lawyer, and to try cases, and then to really advocate for the jury system. I would also, Jeff, advocate or commend everyone to, there's an article that Judge Altman wrote, I think, early 2020, right when COVID came, and it was about how important the jury system is and jury trials, and it was particularly geared towards civil trials because, as you know, the numbers of trials are down, and that causes a lot of problems. But going forward, it causes problems in the sense that, you want to be able to have younger lawyers in your law firm participate in jury trials, so they, let's say 15 years from now, you're not doing jury trials anymore. You want these younger folks to be doing them and to be training other younger people. And so the fewer jury trials we have, the less of that training there is too. So it is very important. It's those two are much different in federal court than state court, but still it's just a very important part of our process. It allows citizens to be judges and to make decisions as to their peers.
Well, I was very touched by that story, and I thought that I appreciate you sharing that bit of your family history and a little bit of your journey through that.
Sure.
So, well, Judge Singal, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I appreciate you giving us your time so much. This is the Floboda podcast hosted by the Fort Lauderdale chapter of ABOTA, and we'll be bringing you more content shortly. And thank you so much for watching or listening. Have a great one.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to see you. Hope to see you in person soon.
You got it.